we think it's so powerful that it could essentially destroy the internet. What they said, and the one thing they said that I do think is really interesting, they said as good as Mythos is at defensive capabilities, it's every bit as good at offensive capabilities. And that's where it gets scary. Are they liable? What if they did release that to the public and then someone caused some major national security risk? They found thousands of, in their words, high severity, 0-day flaws in every major operating system, in every major web browser. These bugs have existed for decades with experts reviewing them, and they still didn't catch them. Anthropic, they had Opus 4.0, and then 4.5 came out, and it was like a world-shattering event, right?
Welcome back to the Daily Stack. We've been switching up this week. We had Rob kicking off on Wednesdays. Normally my day is Wednesdays. And you guys thought we weren't going to talk about AI, but obviously we're back and we don't think about anything else. We've recently had Sam Knight on as a guest, but now we're excited to have Sam Knight more regularly as a co-host. Super plugged in, always impressed with what you're doing, always impressed with just making it applicable for real people to be able to do things in their life, improve their lives with AI. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of news. You know, you have people speaking above you in front of big microphones like this. But really, it's all about just like helping the people, helping the plebs out with actually using AI in a productive manner. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Totally agree. A lot of these things can seem a little intimidating on the surface, but you get your hands on them and it's not so bad. So I'd love to help people bridge that gap.
Yeah. So we got a lot of things going on today. We want to start out really with Claude Mythos has been like, you know, the high level. We'll talk about the models. We'll talk about these big, you know, labs, the companies themselves, and then we'll start to drift towards, you know, practical AI applicability of like how you can use it. So let's start out at the high level of what you're hearing on Mythos. Is this somewhat like of a hype train? Is this building hype? Is this just like stealing the thunder, I think, back from OpenAI after buying TBPN? Like, it does feel like there's some of these like you know, ego games as well as just like capturing the public's attention.
Well, that's the million or maybe multiple $billion question, right? It's how legit is this? Because, and we touched on it a little bit last week, but literally every day when you get on X, you hear groundbreaking news about some new AI tool. And, you know, it turns out that 98% of them, they might be kind of cool, but it's not really that groundbreaking, right? And so it's really hard. It's essentially the boy that cried wolf, except for it's millions of people doing it. And we're talking about technology. So it's really interesting, and I have dove into this pretty deep. And so we've heard rumors of this, and I tell you where I became convinced that Claude had, before actually talking about the model, where I really became convinced that something was going on under the hood differently is about 2 months ago. They just started shipping. I mean, it was an unbelievable cadence. Every day, every week, new features were coming out, and there's started to be rumors about, do they have AGI under the hood? Do they have, you know, what's going on here? And the only logical explanation is just they've cracked something. They've figured something out. And I forget the exact date. I believe it was around mid-February when they first had access to Mythos. Like the training was completed. They were able to go live with it. And so these last 2 months, I mean, every day it's a new highlight from Anthropic about features they're shipping. And so what happened this week was they essentially officially acknowledged what everyone was talking about with these rumors with Claude Mythos. And it's just that it's a brand new model. So it's a new tier of model. So the way that Claude works, there's different tiers, right? There's Haiku, there's Sonnet, and there's Opus. And Opus is the strongest, most powerful, most capable. Sonnet's the one that you should use if you're like essentially replacing Google with Claude, right? Just basic questions, general things, some good tool use. And Haiku is really, in my opinion, it's more for if you're plugging into the API and you want quick responses, you want cheap, you don't want to pay a lot of money. That's kind of where that comes in. So this is I'm going
to mention right there, I've never used Haiku. Exactly. I think it's just kind of funny. It's like what is it doing there? You know, like why would I like want a less power? I mean, I totally get if you're token maxing, you know, which is like what's something that TBPN was talking about yesterday. But for the average person, they're just like, I don't know if I want this like C player on my team. I get it. Maybe if there's a use case, but it's just kind of funny that most people I know don't ever mention Haiku.
I mean, I've used it maybe once, and I've
Yeah.
used Claude for 4 years, and it's like I said, I think the real use case for it is if you are plugging into Anthropic's API, which is very expensive actually
Yeah.
compared to
Super
other
expensive.
models. That's the way you can kind of access Anthropic, but at a very base level. You kind of want some basic output. I can't really think of a situation where you would want to use it besides this. So, anyways, this is essentially a brand new model inside of Anthropic. And the benchmarks came through, which I'm always a little skeptical about benchmarks because I
Hmm.
think that they tune these things to be able to crush the benchmarks, right? Like it just
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. They want to perform well. It's like going into a test already knowing the questions. So I
Yeah.
don't feel like it's a great, I mean, it's the best we have, but I feel like there's going to be something a lot better that we can test these models out with in the future. So, anyways, it's crushing the benchmarks. I mean, we knew it'd do well. We knew it'd be better than Opus, or else they wouldn't put it out. But I mean, it's like crushing them. And so where it gets really interesting is it's so powerful. And I think we need to take another step back because Anthropic, a lot of the criticism that they get is they are the ultimate fear mongers. They're the ultimate, kind of doom and gloom predictions with AI.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a relevant criticism of theirs because, I remember a year ago, Dario, the CEO, who big fan of, incredibly smart person, he was saying, in 6 months, there will be no coding done by software engineers. 6 months goes by, and then it's a new prediction. And it just never really seems to fully come true. Although we do
Yeah.
make significant progress, it's never like the full picture, right? And so the question that you started off with is how legit is this, right?
Yeah.
Like this Anthropic's come out and said we are not giving access to the public to this because we think it's so powerful that it could essentially destroy the internet because we were able to find vulnerabilities in all of the legacy kind of software providers that everyone uses, all of the legacy excuse me, browsers that everyone uses. And so their claim is that this model is so powerful, the regular person cannot get access to it. And I think that's where a lot of this discussion is. It's like, number one, is it up to these labs to decide what people should and shouldn't be able to have access to? Now, of course, it's a
Yeah.
business decision, right? Like they can decide what to do with their business, but just kind of on a higher level, it's like, who are they to tell us that we can or can't? At the same time, the devil's advocate to that is, well, what if someone got access to this and drained your entire bank account or your wallet, your crypto wallet, your Bitcoin wallet, right? Like that's a pretty big security risk. So the question is, how legit is it, right? Like, is it actually an issue? Is it actually scary? And so what they're doing is to kind of mitigate some of the risk here is they're creating a project called Project Glasswing. And they're basically partnering with, I believe it's 12 major businesses, like legacy businesses, to give them access to Mythos, to have them basically stress test it to
Hmm.
see, how good is this at finding vulnerabilities? How good is this at being able to fight off attacks? Because what they said, and the one thing they said that I do think is really interesting, they said as good as Mythos is at defensive capabilities, it's every bit as good at offensive capabilities. And that's where it gets scary, right?
Yeah.
Because let's just take them at their word. Let's just say that they're not doing this to, create press, which I think there's a certain element of that. But let's just say it is the case. That's a pretty big vulnerability. That's a pretty big risk. And I mean, here's an interesting question too. Are they liable? What if they did release that to the public and then someone caused some major national security risk or, hacked Bank of America or something crazy happened? Are the labs liable for that? We haven't really had that experience in society yet. And I do think at some point we will. And we've had questions about if someone commits suicide because on Instagram people were bullying them, is Meta liable? And there's
Yeah.
still back and forth about that. So I'm curious your take actually. Like, do you think in that situation, like, should they be held liable? Because if so, it makes sense to proceed with extreme caution. It's on the flip side of it, I think OpenAI is not near as conservative as they are. In my kind of contrarian opinion, is they're going to come out with a model just as powerful in the next month and a half, and they're going to give full access to everyone for it. So that's
Yeah.
where I stand.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about yesterday, I think on the legal side. I think that, I mean, actually, no, we were talking about this backstage with Joyce Litro a little bit. I think that, he's very bullish on Reddit as a stock. He sees their AI capabilities. He sees the community there, the authenticity. They do a lot of bot protection to make sure that Reddit users are, not bots, that they're not like AI, and that's going to be more valuable. Reddit has a ton of data. They've also are working on a deal with Anthropic, or have done a deal with Anthropic around the use of their data. I think in that situation, on the legal protection side, I think any federal judge or state judge in the United States court, if they saw OpenAI release something using, Reddit data, that Reddit has consumed over time as part of their business, part of their IP, that's the easiest case. They would absolutely not permit OpenAI to do $800 billion IPO and not pay Reddit for that. That would be, I think, the easiest, very cut and dry. Look, you guys have extracted so much value from existing data sources. We're not going to let you capture the value of $800 billion in an IPO and not pay these guys. So I do think that is where, if they're not working deals now, that is where a ton of lawsuits will come in. Sure. I think if you follow geopolitics and you follow, the Anthropic versus the US government, you have a warrant to search people, and there's a reason to have a warrant. I think if we can go into Venezuela and take out this, the leader of the country, if Anthropic did release something where one Department of Defense file got hacked and they release something kind of like an Edward Snowden situation, no matter how powerful that model is, Dario's in handcuffs. You have Delta Force coming in, and they would not hesitate in a second, right? If you can take out Maduro, and there's potential blood, and you're in another country, and there's Absolutely. Geopolitical concern of that, they have no problem, I think, actually going in and locking down the situation on that, whether it's right or wrong. And I believe the sovereignty of private companies, and I do want, we in the US we take pride on encouraging, not having government intervention in the private sector. There's just, you seeing how it played out with Anthropic and the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth and everything. I just don't think that I think they're watching them very closely to see, are we going to have to shut Anthropic down? What's going to be the kill switch if they had something like this, which makes me somewhat concerned around what's going to be the process of what, how do we keep politics out of it? I don't know. I'll stop there.
I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, we're in such an interesting time. In a way, it's almost like a modern version. Well, I mean, it's modern because it's still going on, but a modern version of the gun debate almost, right? Some people think everyone should have access to guns. Some people don't. I think we're going to see the same thing with AI. Some people should have access to these incredibly powerful models. Some people think you shouldn't have access to these incredibly powerful models. And I think that there's going to be a lot of legality going on back and forth between the states, between the federal government, between the people. And it's kind of this tangled web, because at the same time, we're trying to figure out the national framework for AI. California and Colorado want to basically come out with these extremely strict and extremely restrictive ways that you can actually use these models. Other states are probably a lot more wide open. And so what I'm getting at is just, as these models evolve and they become more powerful and they become basically being able to use as weapons, whether that's cybersecurity weapons or, God knows what else, it's going to be really interesting to see how the government plays it, how the people play it. And I mean, I feel like the next year or two is going to be, we're finally at that point, right? There's been all of these concerns over the last several years. AI is going to do this, is going to do that. I feel like we're finally hitting that point where it's wow, it's actually happening. It's actually real. Once again, I'm sure some of this is marketing, but if they're to be believed what they said, I mean, I have a couple notes about it.
Yeah.
They found thousands of, in their words, high severity, 0-day flaws in every major operating system, in every major web browser. These bugs have existed for decades with experts reviewing them, and they still didn't catch them. So if that's true, we're stepping into a new paradigm. If you're to take them at their word, one vulnerability was 27 years old, one was 16 years old. And these are some of the most important systems in the world that they're using this with. And so if we just take them at their word and say, okay, they're telling the truth, we have just stepped into a new world. And so that's what we have to figure out, because it happened like that.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, on the side of finding vulnerabilities, that's the scary thing is you have these huge companies like Cloudflare. We talked a little bit about yesterday. CrowdStrike, so cybersecurity is a theme that we see going to pop up more. Like you have OpenClaw and you have people looking at security risks there, but it's a small amount of people that are using OpenClaw, geographically. I mean, like in the entire world, but you do have a lot of the legacy software that suddenly can, you have an economic incentive because it's so much cheaper now to scrape everything, scrape everything for vulnerabilities, and AI can do it so fast that not everyone can afford CrowdStrike to be able to like run, a big cloud scan every day to go through that. So yeah, legacy software, concerned.
Very concerned, and it kind of plays right into that whole permanent underclass conversation. People talk about you've got 1 month until you're a part of the permanent underclass, and it's funny, but at the same time, it's like if a certain sect of society has access to these powerful tools and another one doesn't, there's a massive leverage distribution issue. Now, on the other side of it, it's like, okay, well, if we release this to the public, we know China's going to have the same model within 6 to 8 months. So that is a situation where I can kind of understand the hesitancy. I think that actually has more to do with it than even the consumer side. Based on what they're saying, I think it has more to do with it because, Dario's come out and said, hey, China is distilling our models. And that's essentially layman's, you can say that's how they're copying the models, right? That's why every 6 to 8 months, a new open source release comes out and it's every bit as good as the, frontier state of the art from 6 to 8 months previous. I think that they don't want to admit it, but I think this is a big part of it too. They know if they release this to the public, boom, they just give access to everyone. Whereas if they can get it installed into these legacy systems and businesses, they can kind of, and this is just my opinion, I don't really have evidence of this, they can kind of get a foothold and not risk as much business disruption potentially by these open source models coming out being way cheaper and, anyone getting access to. So I do think that national security in China and things like that probably is playing a pretty big role in this too. I just wonder, given what just happened with the Pentagon and Anthropic, is there any sort of discourse between them? Are they keeping them in the loop? Hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we have. Is it just a completely, they cut off communications? Obviously, we probably won't know that for quite some time, but that's something I'd be very curious to understand.
Yeah. And we just have our new news 38 minutes ago, maybe 40 minutes ago now. But a small time ago, introducing Claude managed agents. Everything you need to build and deploy agents at scale. It pairs an agent harness tuned for performance with production infrastructure, so you can go from prototype to launch in days. Now in public beta on the cloud platform. I am tripping over my words today, but here's a beautiful little graphic that we can obviously tell was made by Claude, and they have nice aesthetics. This is OpenClaw, right? Like this is the concept of the harness that OpenClaw came out with and really pushed forth. I get you can't necessarily like own every concept, and OpenAI has gone out and they're just like Meta, like Zuckerberg's the king of cloning things and stealing it and putting stories on everything. I think in the same way, like you're seeing the same type of race, same playbook. Anthropic could have had like this harness mentality of deploying agents early on. Like you have to assume so. Like they've been deploying so well, but like let's say they might have imagined June 30th as their launch date, but then OpenClaw came out and really picked up steam in January of this year. So it might have just moved the timeline forward. So that would, if you'd look at that playbook, you're like, okay, I see why they didn't have to like fully embrace OpenClaw as the method. Or as the way that everything goes through it, and they're just going to be on the back end, like you said, want to control more of the front end experience, control the the user experience. But it shows a lot of like why what's come down the past week of like I got the email last week of we're not supporting these harness agents that are open source. What's your thought on this? I mean, this is 40 minutes old, coming out from Anthropic itself.
I think that, anyone that was using Claude Cowork or Claude Codes probably saw this coming from a mile away. I think it was pretty clear that this was heading this direction, and everyone was freaking out when OpenAI acquired. Well, apparently they didn't even acquire OpenClaw. They really acquired the founder's time, something weird like that. Yeah. But anyways, everyone was thinking it was a huge misstep by Anthropic because there was already kind of a feud going on between OpenClaw and Anthropic last week. It heated up a lot more. Like you said, they sent out the email basically saying you can't use Claude with OpenClaw unless you're going through the API, which is obviously incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And so the problem is, it's been really interesting actually to see the last week, everyone's saying, man, GPT 5.4, which is obviously the next best thing you could use inside of OpenClaw. Everyone is just, it's not near as good. It's just not as good. It's not, I see it over and over and over again. And so, like you said, I think that they probably had this on their radar. OpenClaw came out. There was a lot of hype. The OpenAI acquisition, they probably just put a lot more power, or maybe they put this new model towards building it out and getting it ready to go. And so, yeah, I think that this was pretty clear that this was coming. I'm glad to see it. What's going to be interesting is how they handle the rates, because the biggest issue with Anthropic, everyone's always complaining about getting rate limited. I mean, I'm on the pro plan, the $200 a month, and I get rate limited sometimes. It's very frustrating. And so what happens when you have, agentic actions taking place? It's going to eat up tokens. It's going to eat up credits. It's going to eat up your usage. And so on one hand, I know that I believe it was the creator of Claude Code came out and said, hey, look, the reason that we can't allow this on OpenClaw, we just don't have the compute. We have to prioritize our customers before we prioritize third-party tools. We support open source. We think it's great, but we just can't, we wouldn't be able to survive as a business. And I think that's fair. I think that's a fair reason for not allowing it. But now we see it was a little bit more than that. They had a direct competitor coming out and they knew it was a week away. So I'm excited about it. I think, more competition is always better for the consumer. Yeah. My big concern about this is just, what will the usage be like? Am I going to get rate limited after, two tasks, or what's it going to look like? It kind of remains to be seen, but it's definitely really interesting. And I think that you'll see a lot of adoption really quickly because people are on the Anthropic hype train at this point. So anytime they drop something, I mean, people want access to it. So is this, this is live as of right now? Is that what they said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Available on beta. Yeah. Cool. So I'm definitely going to dive into this right after this, but, yeah, I think we saw it coming. It's just a matter of how. I think it'll perform really well. I think Anthropic, Claude in general, is the best in the world at tool calling and tool use. I think that's something that's very, very clear. Even so, I also use ChatGPT Pro, and I compare them all the time. And I'll just say, sometimes I just want to stress test them and see how little I can kind of guide them and how, can I get the right result? And so I'll go into each of them and I'll say the same thing. I did this yesterday. Hey, review my last 4 calls with company, review all my Slack messages with these people, and review my emails from the same context. Give me the output. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me what the next steps are. Claude literally will knock it out in like a minute. It's crazy. GPT, even on the pro tier, will just stop sometimes and it just won't answer me. And even if it does answer me, it does this annoying thing where it'll be like, can I open Granola to access your calls? I have to click yes. Can I open? And I'm just like, why am I having to, I've already connected. Why am I having to do this? So my point is, Anthropic and Claude's incredible at tool calling and tool usage. So I'm pretty excited to see. I mean, I think it should be a very, very legit OpenClaw competitor.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because a lot of it's about like output, right? I think the one thing that we were talking about yesterday with James from Jersey City Meetup. So James, if you're listening, giving you a shout out. But we're talking yesterday around, this past weekend I had to step back from OpenClaw because I'm spending way too much time managing all the problems with. It's just not calling tools. It's not following up. I said, hey, here's a problem. He's like, hey, sorry, I get that. This is not how we should run. This is how we should, work together and run our business. But then it stops. It doesn't actually go and fix it. And you're like, just go do the thing that we talked about, that we agreed upon. Like let's get to the outcome. Let's get to the goal. And like we set goals, and then that was supposed to fix it, but it didn't fix it. Like, and then you keep pushing it to say, if we set a goal, like don't look for immediate feedback every single time from me, but like, continue to work and find solutions to get towards the goal. It seems two of the OpenClaw updates this week were addressing a lot of that. I think a lot of people had those same issues. But the one thing I was talking about yesterday was around, James had mentioned around his experience using Codex Auth was not as good as using Claude Auth. But what you're going for is if you're really using OpenClaw a lot, is being able to have max plan where all of your usage is capped at, say, $200 a month. So it's not like, cheap, but it's not a $2,000, which you could easily run it to. So what we started to do was, or what we were talking about was like, I was like, hey, like I am having a ton of these issues with the Codex Auth. I had to do it because I didn't want to, I wanted to have cap spending. But then if we go beyond that and already have this plan that you're paying $200 a month to OpenAI for this ChatGPT 5.4 Codex, is sitting down and doing the Codex coding version and just using the standalone Mac app. And it was actually great. It was a really good experience. And you sit down and just like Claude Code, you're going through and you're building out, you're connecting to GitHub, you're building out your local files, you're working on building an app. And so I spent 20 hours in this weekend and it was consistent. And I thought that it was night and day difference from using OpenClaw with Codex, even though it's the same model, but using Codex within this, like, just in terminal and then using it within the Codex Mac app, I thought was like, this is the same, very, very similar experience to Claude Code, but a little more, not as good as personality, but it was almost like more methodical, like somebody mentioned German, of just efficiency of going through it. So I would say, like, I would give OpenAI credit on the coding side. I thought that was a big step forward for people looking to just like knock out a good complex task. Like, let's say if you want to build, like your own granola type app, because you mentioned them, or you have an internal like business tool, like your small business, definitely check out Codex if you are using OpenClaw, because then you can use it for the auth for your, main OpenClaw model, your main agent that you want to speak with. But then you can also be using the coding tool on the side. And they've been very generous with tokens. So yesterday, I think Sam Altman did a reset on the usage, like midday or, in the afternoon at some point. And so I haven't hit a limit on using Codex, and I have a $20 plan with Claude, and I wasn't able to do one task with it yesterday on Opus 4.6. So a single like code review, it stopped before it could even actually like start working on the code. It just did the review. So that was my kind of big learning this week, is like, check out OpenAI, the ChatGPT. It still has problems on the main personality side, but there's a ton of value you can get if you do have coding activities to do.
Well, you must have read my mind. That was literally directly related to the daily AI tip I wanted to talk about, because I think I'm a huge Codex fan. I love it. It's a great product. I use Claude Code too. And what I wanted to encourage people to do was to try these tools out, because I think that you hear Claude Code, you hear Codex, you think engineering, you think technical, you think confusing. But when you open it up, you're like, this actually looks pretty familiar to me. It looks like ChatGPT. It looks like Claude. And there's a couple of things that are confusing about it. You basically have to set up your GitHub. You have to create a repo. You need to connect a tool like Versal if you want to create a URL, but we can walk through that really quickly. It's quite simple. I mean, basically, so first things first, what I would recommend is when you're using a tool like Codex or Claude Code on the desktop app, that is, I mean, it's literally a chat bot, right? So you're chatting to it. You don't have to go into a terminal, which I think is the scariest thing for someone that's not an engineer. You don't have to figure all that out. You can just talk to it the way you would talk to a natural LLM. And, one thing that's really good, we touched on this last week, get the main tool to help you prompt the coding tool. So if you're using Claude Code, go to Claude. If you're using Codex, go to ChatGPT and say, hey, here's what I want to do. Here's the output I want. Can you create a prompt for Codex that is optimized to get this result? And it will eliminate a lot of the back and forth you'll have to do. It'll spit out a completely different prompt. You just go paste it in there and it's ready to rock. And so I think that when people see how easy it is to create your own tools, like you said, I'll give an example. The other day or last week, I was like, I need a better way of managing my revenue, my expenses, my profit, and the taxes I should be saving. Like, I'm like, it's 2026. I feel like the tools I'm using suck and it should be a lot better. And so basically what I did is I created my own, I guess, just that accounting software. And it took literally under 15 minutes, like legitimately. And so I just said, hey, here's what I need. I need you to know this is the type of business I have. Here's where the business is based out of. I want to be able to input my revenue, my expenses, and I want you to be able to output my profit, how much I should be saving for taxes per every dollar I make. And I want you to account for the previous money I've made, because obviously, income brackets go up. And so anyways, like a year ago, there's literally a 0% chance I would have been able to do that. I just wouldn't have even known where to start. Today, I go and I say, here's what I want. I want you to optimize the prompt for Codex or Claude Code. Boom, gives me the prompt. And I mean, it spit out an amazing tool that now I'm using every single day. And it's genuinely really helpful. And I kind of see this as the future of software. It's going to be very individualized on what do you need? Me and my fiance, if there's something that we just need, I'll just make an app for it really quickly. I mean, it literally takes 15 minutes. And so what I really wanted to encourage people to do is to try out these coding tools, because they're not even, they're coding tools, but it's really just a chatbot that will spit out incredible output based on what you need. So I think kind of reframing it and thinking about it like that makes it a lot less intimidating. My dad, for example, he's a technical guy, but he's not like an engineer. And I said, hey, you should just try this. He was explaining to me something he wants. And I said, just go into Claude Code, try this. And boom, he called me 30 minutes later. He's like, I can't believe it. This is crazy. And so I think anyone that goes into those tools and just experiments with them, they're going to get incredible output. And I think they're going to be blown away too at just how simple and straightforward it is. And if something breaks down, if there's an error, you can literally just say, I don't know what this means. I don't know how to fix it. You fix it. And it'll go and do it for the most part. So, of course, if you're trying to build like some type of enterprise software solution, maybe you'll run into some issues. But in terms of just like simple things that you want or need help with, these tools are incredible. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's really important that people try them.
Yeah. Small business tip again is if you're using G Suite, so Google Workspace, depending on the plan that you have, you should get Google Gemini Pro access. And I've been using that. So I was using Codex for the main coding tool this weekend. And then I also had like Claude Code to do some reviews, but again, like ran into those limits, even with a, $20 play plan.
Yep.
And then also using for like, so like, let's say you're integrating on the back end, like a different Postgres database, Versal or Vercel has like blobs, database for like images or larger files like video, if you have anything video tied into your app. The one thing is like really good is like Gemini's good at obviously searching the internet. It's like Google. So looking into these different tools, API tools that you might want to plug into your app, good to do research there first on just strategy. And so then I would be say, hey, do I need to plug in these 3 tools? What's the cost outlay look like? What kind of plans can I look at? Is this the right way to do it? And then go put the plan into, Codex or Claude Code and say, this is what, Gemini thinks is the right way to do it. Confirm that. And then if it looks good, let's put a plan together and pursue.
That's pretty much the exact workflow that I have. I'll go to Gemini and I'll do a deep research report about a topic or whatever I'm trying to accomplish, get that report, paste it into the chatbot, whether it's chat or Claude, say, here's the context. Here's what I want to accomplish in Claude Code or Codex. Put it all together, give me the output. Boom. And so, it's funny to hear other people that do that too, because it's like, I don't see a future where everyone just uses one of these tools. To this day, I go between all of them pretty fluidly all day. I'll have chat, check Claude's work. I'll go to Gemini for deep research. I'll go to Grok for trending information on X. Yeah. And, with the agentic stuff too, it's like, I think the thought was that we'll all have an open claw, or we'll all have like a central source. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. It might be like the Claude agent does these things well. And then the Gemini agent is the way that you organize all of your G Suite and your Google Drive and everything. And so it definitely still remains to be seen how all this is going to play out. But I feel like it's going to be pretty across the board. I don't really see anyone coming in and just dominating where you're only using that tool, which I think, a year and a half ago, a lot of people would have said everyone's going to use ChatGPT and nothing else, or, whatever the case might be. So yeah, well, with agents, I assume it's going to follow a similar pattern that the chatbots have, basically.
Yeah. I think, there's so much access to it. It just makes you wonder, like, is it like with the streaming wars, right? Like it's, there was a guy that said, business, like the way to make profit these days is either bundling or unbundling. And, talking about like cable television, and then you get in the streaming wars and they're like unbundling everything so you can break away and cord cutters on the cable cutters, getting away from cable TV. But then now they start bundling back in with Disney and Hulu. And you wonder, like, are we at the phase now where it's going to be completely unbundled and you're paying for all these different streaming services or these different services, and then later it becomes bundled into like one solution where, I use Open Router to access cheaper models, is that like everyone going to go through a router like this, and how much tax can they take on top of that? And I think going to the earlier point we were talking around is, and you mentioned with the new Claude harness that they're releasing. I know Claude managed agents to make it more for the like people that aren't used to it, but like it's a harness just like OpenClaw. So how fast can you burn through credits? Do you have to set up certain things on Haiku? And I think that's the thing that people are going to have to start to realize is like using a single service. Are they going to have a cheap enough low cost model to be able to do the things that you need to do? Because most cron jobs, most processes, hey, read Twitter in the morning and tell me what's hot, or read, the news and tell me what I should know relating to my business. Or if you're a real estate agent, scrape the latest listings off the MLS. Those need to be cheap models, or you're going to burn through, $200 a day or $20 a day. And it's it starts to get real expensive quick. So being able to like work with different models, open source allows you to reach that point. I just don't know how someone like Claude is going to let people do it, with the compute they have.
Well, and that brings the question of how valuable are these labs, right? Because, ChatGPT or OpenAI and Anthropic are the two fastest growing companies of all time, I believe, or very close to it, if not. And if these open source tools are hot on their heels and they're way cheaper, how valuable are these companies actually? Are they worth $1 trillion, or are they worth a quarter of that? I mean, I don't really know if we know the answer to that, because at one point, when ChatGPT first released the pro level subscription, I believe it was when O3 was the main reasoning model. I think it was O3 Pro. So that was the first time where I tried something and was so blown away. I was like, I see a future where there's going to be people with access to high levels of compute and people with access to low levels of compute. And it's almost going to be like a class difference in society. Then open source really started accelerating. And I was like, maybe not. Maybe it's actually going to be a lot more equal than I was anticipating and expecting. And I think we're still kind of waiting to see what the actual answer to that is. The agents have completely added another element, another dynamic to that question and that debate. So I don't think anyone knows, to be honest with you. Every day it's like, okay, this open source thing came out and it's as good. And then, oh, wait, no, Anthropic just dropped Mythos. And, so it's like, I don't know when we'll get that answer, but it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, because there's people that have invested billions of dollars into these companies, and they have to be kind of sweating a little bit, just seeing how quickly the innovation catches up. But then at the same time, these labs are pumping out updates left and right. So it's impressive in itself. And man, it's very exciting from a consumer standpoint, because at the end of the day, we win, right? Like we have these, it's cutthroat, and they're going very cutthroat. So we win at the end of the day. That's how I feel.
Yeah. So moving ahead to Tesla full self-driving.
Yep.
I know you want to chat on this today. Tell us about it. I haven't even I'm looking at Tesla from an investor standpoint, but I haven't stayed really up to date with the self-driving side.
So, this is probably a very obvious statement to 99% of people, but Tesla is much more than a car company, right? They're an AI company, they're a robotics company, but they're really an AI company. And they were actually a pioneer in AI, for that matter. The way that they've built out their self-driving is very different from someone like Waymo. They use a lot of AI heavy compute to be able to, navigate. They don't use any infrared sensors or anything like that. So it's a very different way of going about it. So just starting off with, Tesla is really an AI company at the end of the day, or at least part AI. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors they're going to merge with SpaceX and XAI. Wouldn't be surprised at all. They've announced the Terafab, which is like kind of a 3-in-1 factory for all these different companies. But with that, so they are rolling out right now. I haven't gotten access to it. I have a Tesla. I haven't gotten access to this. It's 14.3. And so this is essentially just their update for full self-driving. What's interesting about this, there's a couple things about this. We are seeing giant, in not even Tesla side, Tesla, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, we are seeing significant leaps without going to a round number. So what I mean by that is, with Anthropic, they had Opus 4.0. And then 4.5 came out, and it was like a world-shattering event, right?
Yeah.
Instead of 5.0. Whereas in the past, it was like you kind of had to make that full leap from version 1 to 2, from 2 to 3. And the incremental improvements, fix some bugs, made it a little bit better. But now we're seeing these 0.1 jumps, if you will, make a massive difference to these products and how they actually work. I don't really know like what that means, but it just seems like the incremental improvements are actually becoming larger and larger. And so that's the first thing that stood out to me. This is only 14.3, but some of the highlights of this, according to Tesla, this is going to allow for 20% faster reaction times from their self-driving fleet. That's a significant difference. I mean, if you think about the difference in 20%, if someone's barreling at you at 100 miles an hour, they're going the wrong way, something crazy is happening, difference in 20% could easily save lives, easily. So if that's the case, it's huge. But another thing that was very, 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 very interesting is this is introducing the use of vehicle to fleet communication. So they're using hard reinforcement learning examples. So like my Tesla can learn from your Tesla, can learn from their Tesla. And, you know, they are training on data. They always have done this where they've taken the data and they've been able to train on it. But now it seems to be much more robust and much more advanced. And essentially what they're saying is that the new 14.3 is the first model of Tesla self-driving. And this is all very new, so I think a lot of it's kind of being figured out, but it's the first model that's actually using reasoning inside of its inside of the way that it operates. So instead of just following some algorithm where it's like, okay, I need to go here, I need to avoid the cone there, it's actually deciphering what it's seeing in real time and reasoning about, oh, that policeman has stopped that person, so I should slow down, I should get over. Whereas it could recognize a vehicle on the side of the road just based on its training data, it now theoretically should be able to actually reason and understand the information that's coming in and can act with more nuance than it could in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think people like with there's so much consumer AI in your face with other things, and you see Tesla robots. The self-driving aspect has taken a back seat because the progress wasn't as fast. But then you have other, you have like Rivian coming up, and you have these other competitors, but it takes time. And I think that that's the thing that people have to be patient and realize is like, this is not something that you can move at the speed of doing like Claude Cowork or something, because you're driving 3,000 pound vehicles that can take people out. So I think that it's a good thing. The pace of development isn't, super rapid, and it's not like we have self-driving Mythos and you can just release it in the wild. And the newest model is just like, rams through people. Like that is not what you want. But it is like, that is like why Tesla's super interesting. I think that proprietary data is something that like nobody else is going to have access to. And they got to make a car that like I want like a family size car, but wife doesn't want a Cybertruck. It's just like I feel like the burden of just having the loudest car in the neighborhood. It's not like you're against being an early adopter on all kinds of tech, but like there's a level of flashiness. Certainly, people in the Bitcoin community don't love of just like I don't want to like show off like wealth, and like having a Cybertruck just seems very like flashy in itself. So they need to make like a Toyota Sequoia, or like like the Rivians are obviously people love them because they look, I think, really well designed. People love them. I get why.
I agree.
I get why Elon like wants to draw attention, but if he can do a more flexible car, I think that's going to kill it, because you want to do it for the tech. You trust those engineers more than you do any other team.
So my prediction in the next 6 months, we'll have a announcement about that exact product you're talking about, because there's been some rumors, I don't know if you've seen, actually, when the Cybertruck was released, in the video in the background, there was an SUV kind of shaped like a Cybertruck, and people were pointing it out. And Elon has liked some of the posts about it. And he actually put something out either last week or the week before saying something way more exciting than a minivan's coming to Tesla, something along the lines of that. Yeah. So I do think that that's in the works. I'm the same. I'm with you. It's like, right now I have a Model Y. I love it. I think the Model Y is an incredible car. It's not big enough for a family though, so the Cybertruck is a little too flashy. So where is that kind of in between, right? And I hope that is coming. And so, even for me, just thinking about a family, you think about self-driving, the safer that is, the more comfortable you're going to be putting your partner and their kids in there and sending them off and feeling confident about it. Teslas are already very safe cars. I'm with you. I love the Rivian design. I think it's such an amazing, it's just a beautiful car, really. Yeah. And really Tesla for me is like driving an iPhone. That's what I love about it. It's like, it's just, the tech is just so, if you're a tech geek like me, I mean, it is just so satisfying. Even the Grok integration's been fantastic inside of Tesla. Really? I'll be, just give you an example, not to go off on a tangent, but, I'll be in like a city that I've never been in before. And I'll be driving through and I'll just turn on Grok and I'll say, hey, you can do it a million things. You say, hey, where's the closest X, Y, and Z to me? Or can you put this in the GPS? I want to go to the best donut shop in town. And it just puts it in there for you. But also what's really cool is I can say, hey, as I'm driving through this town, give me the backdrop of the history of this town from the day it was started to where we are today. And I'll say, okay, well, to your right, this used to be a settlement where people did this, and then it evolved to this test. So it's just a really cool integration feature. And I think it's a kind of like an Easter egg almost of how Tesla, SpaceX, and XAI are all going to merge together at some point. Yeah. With that said, really excited to try out 14.3. If it did nothing else but have 20% faster reaction time, that alone would be incredible and probably save millions of lives, in my opinion.
Yeah. Let's hope for the best on that one. I think that, so much attention is elsewhere. I think some of these models, and certainly comes from the defense side. If cybersecurity, I think is the biggest concern. You obviously have the war. You have airstrikes and drones driven by some of these models talking around, hey, the Department of Defense used Claude to set up the initial strike in Iran. I think there's so much that it's kind of good to have attention away from the full self-driving so that we're not moving too fast on it, that we can let that develop. But I'm excited to hear that at least there's rumors around a more SUV family-oriented car, because you want to, tech it's not going to be commodity, right? I think you see a lot of these models that are Haiku could be very similar to Kimi K2.5, or, if you use Ollama to connect to these open source models you download. Some of them, outside the frontier models, it's hard to really test and tell the differences specifically. How are you going to, always design a test if it's a cron job of scrape this website? It's either going to do it or not, or it's going to do an okay job or not. But most people aren't going to go through and test it. But with self-driving, you have to have a frontier model every time. You need to have the best, Opus 4.6 running all the time, 24/7. And right now, if you ask Anthropic to do that, they don't have the money or the compute to make the commercialize that in a way that's cheap enough. As we've seen with Tesla, they do a good job of any tech company of trying to make a business out of the tech so that they're not running out of cash, right? SpaceX can make money off of, we talked about this yesterday with Starlink, filling up those payloads, future payloads with satellites from Starlink that they can make money off of.
It'd also be interesting to see just on the kind of business strategy standpoint, will FSD ever be licensed? Will Toyota be able to use FSD in their products? I don't know. I have no idea, but that would seem to be a massive, massive revenue driver for Tesla. At the same time, it would allow other companies to have access to probably one of their moats, right? Which is that. However, I think that when you look at, NVIDIA has essentially released an open source version of Tesla FSD. I don't think it's quite as good, but I think it's pretty dang good for being open source. And so I think one concern from Tesla could be, well, are these same way it's happening with the models, will these open source competitors eventually be good enough to actually put on the roads? If so, then it would make sense to have the licensing model, right? Otherwise, if they feel like it's a strong moat that no one can compete with, they keep rolling with it. But, I'm really hopeful for this. I'm just a huge fan of self-driving in general. I remember in 2016 or 17, when I was living in Scottsdale, they introduced the first Waymos to the public. There was a person sitting in the front seat, and I got on the beta list, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So just to see how far it's come over the last 10 years has been pretty mind-blowing. And, I just think it's going to save millions of lives ultimately, whether it's drunk driving, people getting tired, just regular accidents happening. I've put thousands of miles on my FSD, and I first got a Tesla probably 4 years ago, and the rate of improvement from then to now in self-driving is nothing short of unbelievable. When I started, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is cute, basically. I wouldn't really trust this, but it's cute. Now, I wouldn't do this, but I would literally put a blindfold on and trust it to get me to my destination. It's that good. So you can only imagine where we're at in 6 months, a year, 3 years, and so forth.
Yeah. Speaking of drunk driving, we have the Masters this week, and will Tiger Woods play? I don't know. But he does need to get a full self-driving car. I'll say that. It's dicey down there in Florida. We're pulling up one of our sponsors predicts their market for who is the Masters winner. We created this market here at the Daily Stack, and right now we have 66 trades on it, which is I'm happy with that. That's our first market created. It's a Bitcoin powered prediction market, and people are interested. My sister just pulled up to the Masters, and she goes every year, and I'm salty about it. But she goes with her company. What's your take on it? As someone who lives in Georgia, do you follow it closely, or is it something like country music, where me being from Georgia, I don't like country music because you grew up and it's so like a shtick that you're like, all right, dude, you're not that country. You're just like put on a hat and you pretend you're country, but you live in the apartment in Nashville that's like really swanky.
The country music thing is hilarious. Actually, I resonate with that a lot. Growing up in Georgia, I do follow the Masters pretty closely. I love sports. I played college baseball, so I any sports I can't get enough of.
Yeah.
I'm definitely rooting for Scotty. I think he's got it. We'll see what happens. I wish Tiger was going to be in there. Honestly, it's kind of a shame because, I mean, it's just sad to see. I mean, but I would have loved to see. I mean, how cool would that have been if he could get in there at his age and actually, make some noise and do something good. So I know several people going. I just think the Masters is amazing. The tradition, the grounds are beautiful if you've ever been. I mean, it's just an incredible place. So I mean, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I was talking about this morning. It's just unreal on the side of even more so now. We talk about thematically Gen Z and every generation really that's been overwhelmed with the release of the cell phone, the iPhone being 24/7 plugged in, and then now you get AI and there's a ton of slop and the slop is just increasing and you get inundated with it. Ads are now UGC, user generated content, but they're AI generated, so it's like fake authenticity. So I think the Masters is going to be become even more valuable in a spectacle because no cell phones are allowed. Like the scoreboards aren't electronic, so you can't see what's going on until they manually update the scoreboard. And I thought it was just such a cool experience to be able to walk around and you don't know what's going on. You don't know who's winning all the time. So you're not always plugged in with like the information overload, but you're enjoying walking the green grass and the trees and everything, enjoying the golf. But then you start to hear, if there's a roar of a crowd, it's Tiger Woods probably hit a putt or, landed one on the green or, any of these, big celebrity golfers is going to have such a big crowd following them. So then you start to pick up on, how the field is doing. So on a Sunday, it gets really intense on knowing what's going on. So people are kind of scrambling around. Feels like you're in the 50s or 60s, pre-technology, somewhat like Frank Herbert was really smart in Dune to have that was whatever Bootlerian jihad where he purposely took out a lot of the AI and computers from the core concept and the core plot so that it didn't like date itself and so that it wasn't focused on that, but it was focused on the other pieces of the story. So that made Dune great. And Dune has been, people say that now, oh, that's great that it wasn't, always focused on what computers are there. Same thing here. I think the Masters it does an amazing job of getting people out of the normal sports experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like the only time someone's in the present moment, not connected to some device, right? So I think that's actually going to be a trend moving forward. I see a lot of musicians doing that where you can't or they lock your phone as it goes in. Yeah. Obviously schools. I think we all craving that in today's world. We all want to just kind of disconnect some and just live in the present moment, but it's very hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, this is the final AI tip is find your way to disconnect. Don't sleep on Corey Connors. Is that a pro golfer? I'm not in the game as much as I used to be on following golf.
Yeah, it is. And I think, well, here's the thing. I think Scotty's got it, but the favorite doesn't usually play out too well. So let's see what happens. But yeah, honestly, I kind of just got jealous as we were talking about that. I wish I could be in the present moment like that more. I just think about it. It's like, I'm even not to derail us, but I'm so connected, so connected, AI, this and that. It's only becoming more and more. And so something like the Masters, that just traditional, the way that they have it set up, I hope we see more of that in society.
Yeah. Yeah. People are looking for it. I think in-person events, if you're in New York, come to our next Stack and Sip event at Upkey. We're trying to do them every month. Might even do one in Atlanta. Now that we now have to fly
Yeah.
back to Atlanta, get Sam involved. We'll do an open claw meetup. We'll sit down and go through that. Just want to rehash for the audience. Sam's AI tip for the day is, I'll let you repeat it.
Yeah. So essentially, try out Claude Code or Codex. If you use ChatGPT, try Codex. If you use Claude, try Claude Code. The reason I say this is because once you see what happens when you use these tools and what it can actually create, it's going to unlock a world of creativity that will make your life better. If you have something just annoying in your life, a lot of times you can create something that will solve that problem. So I just want to empower you guys to just try it out. Even if you've never written one line of code in your life, I promise you it's going to be a lot more straightforward. If you ever have questions and it starts to, push back on you or get confusing, just go to this chatbot and ask it what to do, and it'll literally walk you right through it. So it's a lot easier than you think, and I think it will unlock a lot of creativity and utility for everyone.
And I will follow up to the second part of that, which is part of what you said earlier, is use the normal chat function in Claude or ChatGPT, or use Gemini to formulate the best prompt you can to try to achieve what you want to achieve, and then put that in the coding tool, which is like switching, flipping over to the other side of the pillow, and you're in the coding tool, because there is a plan mode, and you probably want to start on plan mode, but it's usually better. Let's say, especially if you're going to use like an expensive model like Opus, or you're using, ChatGPT 5.4 high or extra high, you don't want it to start coding immediately. You want to one-shot things. I think it's fun and cool, but like it's better when you're not going down a bad direction of building code that's not what you want. Like I do a ton of screenshots every day. So I do, pictures worth 1,000 words. So I'm always dropping in screenshots. But if you're in the coding tool, you don't want to drop in a screenshot, because it might just copy that screenshot exactly, instead of, using that as a flavor enhancer of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And literally the last thing I would say, you're going to need to set up a GitHub account. People can get intimidated by this. GitHub is Google Docs for code. It's not intimidating. It's literally just where your code lives in the cloud. Don't worry too much about it. It's actually pretty easy and straightforward. If you spend 20 minutes just going through it or watching a YouTube video, you'll be able to do it. So that's something you'll need to do if you want to use these tools. For the most part, don't let it scare you.
Yeah. I was just using yesterday, figuring out the right process between GitHub accounts connected, it's installed in the command line, and then having, which is a good thing to think about, is don't be tied to one model. Don't be tied to like, oh, everything's downloaded into Claude. If you have GitHub, both and any AI tool that is decently advanced will be able to access the same, source of truth, which is going to be GitHub. And so they can both read the files. They could also see what the other AI has recently worked on in like a branch or, a fork of the code. And so absolutely, yeah, I support the use of GitHub, but it does take some learning. So use AI separately, like a Gemini, to say, how do I get started in GitHub, and what do I need to know to like simplify everything?
And once you connect them, a lot of times, like I have Codex and Claude Code go into GitHub itself and make a lot of alterations. So once it's connected in a certain way, like a lot of it can be prompted. So, just if anyone's intimidated, I find that helpful.
Amazing. All right. So we're excited to get this going every week. Sam, thank you for coming on, and excited to have you more often. We want to make this like AI applicable for everyone. We've had a ton of interest in like in-person events and just talking through, all the changes coming with like Claude Mythos. What should we run OpenClaw on? Are you dealing with the same, personality issues? So let us know, shoot us a DM or just let us know in the comments on what you guys want to see. And we'll come back with even better tips each week.
Yep. It was a pleasure being here. Can't wait for next week. A lot of fun. Look forward to those suggestions and questions so we can keep it rolling.
Sweet. All right. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.